Question 1. Your company has decided to make a major revision of their API in order to create better experiences for their developers. They need to keep the old version of the API available and deployable, while allowing new customers and testers to try out the new API. They want to keep the same SSL and DNS records in place to serve both APIs. What should they do? Times A. Configure a new load balancer for the new version of the API. Times B. Reconfigure old clients to use a new endpoint for the new API. Times C. Have the old API forward traffic to the new API based on the path. Times D. Use separate backend pools for each API path behind the load balancer. The correct answer is D. Use separate backend pools for each API path behind the load balancer. Explanation. To support both the old and new versions of the API while maintaining the same SSL and DNS records, you can use Google Cloud HTTPS load balancer with backend services. Each backend pool can route traffic to the appropriate version of the API based on the request path or other attributes, example host header or URL mapping. This setup allows 1. Path-based routing. The load balancer can distinguish between the old and new API based on the request path, example v1 * routes to the old API, v2 * routes to the new API. 2. Seamless migration. Both API versions are accessible without requiring client-side changes or reconfigurations. 3. Reusability of SSL and DNS. You keep the same SSL and DNS records, as the load balancer handles all requests and directs them appropriately. Why not the others? Times A. Configure a new load balancer for the new version of the API. This would require additional DNS configuration and wouldn't allow seamless routing between the APIs under the same domain. Times B. Reconfigure old clients to use a new endpoint for the new API. This places a burden on clients to reconfigure and disrupts existing integrations. It contradicts the goal of keeping the same DNS records. Times C. Have the old API forward traffic to the new API based on the path. This introduces complexity, as the old API would need to proxy requests. It can lead to latency issues and is not a clean architectural solution. Recommended approach. Using separate backend pools behind a load balancer is a clean, scalable, and Google recommended way to manage multiple API versions with minimal disruption.